Okay, so whenever we want to reduce in terms of the inflation target, the idea is that you want to deliberately create some sort of a recessionary gap, yes? Now, how exactly do we create this gap is to pretty much using the policy reaction function, yes? So here we go. Now, if you guys still remember me correctly, the policy reaction function has the policy reaction function work upwards, and we have the real interest rate, and we have the inflation on the x-axis, yes? Now, how do we actually create a recessionary gap? Is by having the aggregate demand curve shift towards the left, yes? Now, how do we actually get the AD curve to shift to the left? Is by using a monetary tightening. Now, if I say there's a monetary tightening, now this means that the policy reaction function will shift upwards, yes? Which means that at any given level of inflation, the real interest rates are now higher, isn't it, yes? Now, what this means is that whenever we have a monetary tightening, it will actually shift the aggregate demand curve towards the left, yes? So this leftward shift is corresponded by a upward shift in terms of the policy reaction function. Now, which means that we'll end up at point B, whereby our output is equal to Y1, and then we have pi dash, okay? So, at point B, what type of gap do we have? So, you say that at point B, we say that Y dash is less than Y star, yes? Now, in this subject, the Ogun's law is actually quite famous, yes? So, it's always a good idea to pull out the Ogun's law because it describes the relationship between the unemployment gap and the output gap, yeah? So, we say that because Y is less than Y star, we know that Ogun's law is Y minus Y star divided by Y star is equal to negative beta U minus U star. Yeah, so this is the Ogun's law. So we say that whenever Y dash is less than Y star, then Y is actually bigger than Y star. Yes. So we say that. Oh, sorry, I didn't say Y star is bigger. My apologies. Whenever Y dash is less than Y star, U is bigger than U star. Sorry about that. Okay. So whenever the unemployment is bigger than what U star, this means we have some sort of a cyclical unemployment, isn't it? Yes. So in a recession, people are generally depressed, isn't it? Yes. Now imagine that you are losing your job. Okay. Now, are you going to be expecting a high inflation or low inflation? Well, think about it, right? If you are originally on a $100,000 per year job, suddenly you lost your job, your confidence is going to be at all-time low. But the idea is that if everybody's in a recession, then your expectation on the inflation will be lowered, yes? So which means that because of the recessionary gap, the inflation expectation reduces, which ultimately results in the aggregate supply curve to shift down towards the equilibrium point, yeah? So we say that the AS curve will eventually shift down to AS1 all the way to point C, isn't it, yes? Now at point C, we have pi T1, and then we return ourselves back to this potential level of output. Now before we forget, okay, this part is actually quite important, is that how exactly do we move from B to C? Yes, you have to talk about this transition. Now the transition goes like this. The movement along B to C is corresponded by the movement along in this direction on the new policy reaction function. Yes, so this is from B to point C. Yes, so again, before I said it, right, the idea is that when we talk about this transition or movement along the AD curve back towards this new equilibrium, you have to correspond by the corresponding movement along the new policy reaction functions, which allows the economy to move back towards this new equilibrium point, yes? So once we hit point C, this means that the economy is again back to its potential level of output, where Y is equal to Y star and U is equal to U star. And again, Ogun's, yes? So the idea is that once we have done that, but ultimate goal is that our inflation target is ultimately lowered, yes? So, now obviously for your practice, now I think that's a good idea to think about now what happens if the RBA wants to actually increase the inflation target. Now if you want to increase the inflation target, then just do the opposite, right? We'll do a monetary loosening, which means that the aggregate demand curve will push out, and we go the opposite direction, yes? So I think for your practice, why not? Let's just do the inflation target going upward, yes? Now, for the last part of this video, I want to talk about is that what happens if there is a permanent increase in prices versus if there is a temporary change in terms of prices. So here we go. So first of all, I want to go through whereby there is what we call the temporary shock in oil price, yes? So we have the output on the horizontal axis, and we have inflation on the vertical axis. Now, before you guys go through the model, it's always a good idea just to draw out your beautiful diagrams. Now, without a good model, it doesn't look too great, yes? So this is point A. We have the original point, which corresponds to the y star, and then we have the pi t 0, okay? So this is AS0, this is AD0, okay? Now, hypothetically assume that there's what we call this temporary increase in oil price. Now, if there's a temporary increase in oil price, this means that the AS curve will shoot up to AS1, okay? So that means we are temporarily at point B, whereby inflation is at pi 1, and obviously the output is at y1, yes? Now, one thing you have to be careful is that it really comes down to what the RBA's stance is, right? So the idea is that if the RBA cares about the output gap so much, such that it doesn't care about inflation, then the best way to fix a temporary shock is just to push the aggregate demand curve back towards the right. And how to do that? They can use the policy reaction function. Yeah? So how do I shift the AD curve towards the right? Is when we have the policy reaction function shifting down. Yeah? So a monetary loosening will shift the AD curve back towards the right such that the complete output gap will be eliminated straight away. But the question I'm going to ask you is that, well, is this the optimal strategy? Well, probably not, right? Because the idea is that in Australia, we have some sort of a inflation target, isn't it? Yes? And now we know that in Australia, the inflation target is about 2 to 3%. Now, the idea is that under what circumstance do I actually want to use the monetary policy? Now, in this circumstance, I said already, we have a temporary shock, yes? Now, having a temporary shock just means that after a certain period, the oil price will actually go back down towards the original state, yes? So if the RBA cares about this inflation target, then what the optimal policy trying to do is that is just do nothing, yes? So the answer is, you know what, just wait, because after the temporary shock, the AS curve will eventually come back down to the original point anyway, yes? So this is the case analyzing what is this temporary shock in terms of oil price. But what happens if there's a permanent increase in terms of oil price? Well, if there's a permanent increase in oil price, then this kind of makes things a slightly more difficult, yes? Okay, so how do we actually talk about a permanent increase in terms of the oil price? So let's go ahead and do this analysis, yeah? So here we go. So we say that we have the output, and we have the inflation, and we have the aggregate supply curve, and we have the aggregate demand curve, yeah? So call this AD0, AS0, yes? And then this is the Y start 0, okay? Which is the long run aggregate supply curve, and then we have pi t0, okay? So if there is a permanent increase in terms of oil price, now I want to ask you guys, what is oil used for? Well, you probably think that, hey man, oil is used for driving cars. Well, yes, but believe it or not, oil is actually a major input in all productions in machineries, producing these factory outputs, yes? Now, if there is an increase in terms of this output, yes, for example, an increase in prices permanently, then this will actually permanently increasing the cost of production. So which means that whenever we say that there is a permanent increase in terms of oil prices, then the long run aggregate supply curve will actually shift towards the left. Okay, so we say that if there is a permanent change, then we have y star 1, yes? So, initially, the economy is actually at point A. Now, this means that whenever we have the long run aggregate supply curve shift, then our reference point has now changed. It is no longer y star 0. It is y star 1, which is our new potential level of output. Now have a look. At point A, y star 0 is actually bigger than y star 1, isn't it? Now what type of gap do we have? Now we have a expansionary output gap, yes? Now in expansionary output gap, this means that u is less than u star, right? Again, Ogun's law, right? So this means that the inflation expectation will increase, right? So which means that the AS curve will eventually shift up from A to point B, yeah? So this movement along A to B is obviously corresponded by the policy reaction function by the movement along in this direction, yeah? So this direction is corresponded by this direction, yeah? So how we return from A to B. Now this is obviously assuming that there is no inflation target, because once we get to here, then clearly can we all see that inflation 1 is now higher than inflation target, isn't it, yes? So what can we do at this particular point, at point B, is that if the RBA really want to bring down the inflation back to pi t, is that assuming that we reached point B, yes, that means the RBA have to use the monetary tightening, yes? The monetary tightening will shift the policy reaction function upwards, which means that we are forcing the aggregate demand curve to shift towards the left from AD0 to AD1, yes? Now have a look. We're now at point C, whereby our output is y double dash, and then this point here is pi 2, yes? Now at point C, y double dash is clearly smaller than y star 1, yes? So what type of output gap do we have? We have a recessionary output gap. And again, in recession, people become less confident, losing their jobs, which means inflation expectation will reduce, which means that the AS curve will come down to AS2, yes? So the movement along the AD all the way to point D, yes? So, from C to D, I said it, how does the economy return? From C to D, you have to show the corresponding movement along the policy reaction function, yes? So how does the economy move from C to D? Is when it's a movement along the new policy reaction function in the opposite direction, yes? So from C to D is corresponded by the movement along the policy reaction function in this direction, yeah? Because by reducing the real interest rate, we are effectively stimulating the aggregate demand along the AD curve, yes? Now, once we actually hit the point D, then have a look. Output is back to y star, and then pi t0 is again restored, okay? Now, as you can see, that the ADAS model is really a very clever model in terms of describing how do we keep the relationship between inflation and the output, yes? So obviously there's a lot more analysis that we can do, but for the sake of your learning, these are the things, the major impact in terms of how to use the ADAS model. Now, if any questions, please feel free to inquire at www.xpeducation.com.au and just hit the inquiry button, and you can please feel free to leave a comment, or you can hit the subscribe and like us, and more excellent videos will be produced for your learning sake. Now, thanks again for watching, and hopefully to see you guys soon. Take care. Bye for now.